Hello YouTube, Lou here from Jersey Shore Fabricators. Okay, so first video from the trailer that we made a little while ago. So you've gone out, you've bought yourself a vehicle, you found what you were looking for. Well, now what do? You know, you buy it, you're happy, and then you discover that there's some issues with it, like any used car doesn't. So behind me you'll see we have a 1991 Jeep Wrangler. Your average run-of-the-mill. It's a good-looking truck. It's a good street truck. Wouldn't try to do the Rubicon with it, but you know, it's a good clean truck. It's got a fairly new paint job on it. It runs pretty good, but it's got some issues. You know, the customer called me up and said, hey, listen, I just bought this thing. I need you to go over and tighten it up. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do an inspection. We're going to jack it up. I'm going to get the wheels off of it. I'm going to go over this thing bumper to bumper so that we can see what we have to deal with. Let me just do that, and we'll come over, we'll take a look. You can see it's got a fairly new paint job. It's not a bad looking truck at all. Alright, there's some runs in the paint. There's some oil drips. And we're going to get into it, and we're going to get him straightened out and tell him everything he needs to know about his truck. What has gone wrong? What has the previous owner done that wasn't right? You know, what can we do to make it better? So we'll be back in a little bit. Okay, so we have our Jeep in the shop. We got it jacked up and we got the wheels off of it. And when we do an inspection, we see around the motor that there's the normal weeping and slight oil leak that all these Jeep Straight 6s have. There is an oil leak under the truck. We weren't sure whether or not it was the valve cover gasket or the rear main. If I just take my hand and go back behind here right underneath the valve cover gasket, I'm feeling for fresh oil, and that's clearly old oil. So his problem is going to be a rear main gasket. When we look at the cooling system, the cooling system is green, and you can see the first row of the cooling tubes down there. So the cooling system has been serviced, something we're not going to be concerned about right now. The customer also stated that he had a problem with the brakes. So first thing I do is I look at the brake fluid, and it looks like it's been in there since 1991. So I'm going to recommend a fluid change, probably a master cylinder. We look at the air filter, and the air filter itself we can see through. It's nice and clean. So if somebody has done that, we're not going to worry about changing that for him. Look at the reservoir tank, and it is damn near empty, so there might be a slight leak someplace. It has been hot lately, so some of it may have evaporated off. There's nothing except for junk inside the windshield washer reservoir. Now, the two big things that we have to be concerned with is what kind of shape is the trans fluid in. This is where you want to be important. You want to take your time and look at it. When we look at this, the fluid's nice and clear, nice and bright red. That's just the way it should be. It doesn't smell burnt. So at some point this has had a trans service. Looks like recently, which is great. You know, the truck shifts fine, drives fine. Look at the engine oil. You know, it's been in there for a little while, but it's not overly, you know, it's not black. There's no signs of water on the oil. You know, so the motor itself seems to be in good shape. It runs like a top. Sorry about that. I'm trying to do this with one hand. You know, you hear the injectors a bit, and you know the normal straight 6 sounds, but other than that, it drives fine. Now, what we did have a concern about, like I said, was this oil leak down here, which goes from the front of the motor all the way to the back of the motor, and then of course down the transmission pan and all that. So it's got what I like to call the automatic chassis lubrication system. So we're going to put a oil pan gasket and rear main in it and get that tightened up from. The customer also had a concern with the brakes. When we look at the brakes through the inspection port here, The brakes have even wear on both pads. Okay, we're looking here, and we're looking here. If one was more worn than the other, then I'd say the caliper is hanging up. Both sides actually look the same. There's no scoring on the rotors. The rotors look great, so we're not going to, worry about that. I'm going to suspect that there's a problem with the master cylinder at this point. When we look down the frame, we are on the Jersey Shore, so we look down the frame and we see the normal rust that we expect to see out here. Lots of salt water. I'm sure this truck spent some time on the beach. Come down here along the frame. Everything is, well, it looks like a 91 Jeep. No real surprises. The fuel tank skid plate has some rot on it, so I'm going to recommend that we get that changed out at some point. I already pulled the drums off, and the rear brake shoes look fine. They look like they've been replaced. There's still a lot of material left on them. When I look inside the drum looks normal. No scoring and no lip on there. And plus, these even say made in Argentina, so we know that somebody replaced them at some point. Come along the back where the cross member is. That looks like it's in good shape. We see those rotted out quite a bit. Somebody put a 2 or 3 inch body lift on this. Typical for a Jeep, a street Jeep, a mall crawler, if you will. Again, we have rust and pitting around the body mounts, but nothing's broken off. The frame hasn't broken into a million pieces, so we're in good shape there. We have this custom 2-piece exhaust system, so we'll see if we can't talk them into full-on exhaust system, because the rest of it looked kind of sketchy too. So at this point, what does he have? Well, he's got a 91 Jeep that's well worn. Somebody used it up. They threw a paint job on it and sold it. They put on their custom lights there. And then inside the Jeep, they did some custom stereo work. This wiring is pretty lovely. So we're going to get that straightened out. And for those of you who are as old as I am, you remember the old Jensen 7-band EQs we used to put into our systems with house speakers in the back of our car. Yeah, those were the days. Thank God the 80s are over. But the sound system works, so we're just going to clean up the wiring and make it look a little less atrocious. The only other concern he had was here with this wiper blade. When they put it on the arm, they put it here so that the wiper blades look normal. Usually when you see a YJ, one wiper blade is normal and the other one comes up on an angle like this, so you don't get this and end up destroying the wiper blade. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and drain the oil and get the oil pan down and get this rear main taken care of, and then after that, see what we're going to do about the brakes and everything else that's going on. Okay, I hope that this helped a bit when it comes to doing an inspection on your own vehicle, either before you buy it or after you buy it, to find out what you have to work with. You want to put your hands on everything. You want to look for things that are obviously out of place. You want to look for worn items. You want to look for torn boots, like around here at the tie rod ends, and your steering arm and all that. You want to look for bolts that are loose. Massive leaks. Really crappy wiring. So what my suggestion is when you find a vehicle and you're going to do things like this, you have to, sorry about that, you have to go over it piece by piece and do what I call a triage. Okay, what's the most important thing that's to be taken care of? For some people it's aesthetics, for some people it's mechanical. For us here, it's always mechanical first. So what's the worst mechanical items? Well, we have a pretty good leak going on down there, and we also have a pretty shoddy brake system. So they both kind of take precedence over everything else. In your case, maybe you just have bad wiring someplace. In your case, maybe you bought it and you drove home and it started overheating. Well, triage. Take the most important, work down to the least important. It's always safety first. It's always brakes. You always start with brakes, for me. Always start with brakes, and then you work your way through the steering. The steering on this is nice and tight. For a leaf-sprung Jeep, this thing actually rides very well. The steering is nice and tight. I didn't have any problems. I drove it about a half hour from where the customer lives back to the shop here. It's slow, but it drives great. So as I said, I hope that this helps you when it comes to going out and picking out a car for yourself, what you're going to be doing, how you're going to do it. It's entirely up to you and your budget. Okay, so we're on our little YJ Wrangler project here, doing an oil pan gasket and a rear main seal. It's just a lot of nuts and bolts. You may have one of these plastic cloth pieces underneath there. You'd need a panel trim remover tool, kind of like that right there, to get the buttons out. Get that out of the way, and then get every tool you have in your socket set, because Jeep is smart enough to put in 3 or 4 different size of bolts with nuts to hold up the transmission lines if you have an automatic. Studs versus bolts. And then they use a sealer, which was created by Satan, I believe, where you have to almost destroy the pan to get it down. But once you get the pan down, you need to get in here and scrape all of that off. All the rails, both sides, front and back. Also, you're going to have to take down the starter, and you're going to have to take down the transmission inspection cover, which is all the way back there, depending on how the light's getting it. Right back there. Once you get your pan out, I have a big mason pan that I use, but you're going to use, again, every tool in your arsenal. Wire wheel, air grinder, scraper to scrape and get this down to bare metal, because a new gasket needs that bare metal. Here's the gunk that you're going to be looking at once you get everything apart and you're ready to start cleaning it. Again, it's created by Satan, so be prepared to waste a set of clothes and a whole bunch of time getting this cleaned up. It's not a bad job, it's just a long job. Like I said, if you look, this is a very long oil pan. It's about 3 feet long, and has, 132 bolts in it. When you're taking it out, if you happen to smash the side of the pan, it's not a big deal. I'm going to show you how to fix that. But it's just a matter of getting through and get everything cleaned up. Take the time to clean the outside of the pan while you're here. That way when you go to put it back together, you're not dealing with a slick mess. And also take the time to clean out the inside of the pan. I haven't yet because of all the cleaning that I'm doing. Alright, see you in a bit. Alright, so you get your pan off, and you got everything cleaned up. And when you get done, you put it down, you realize, oh boy, I got this big deviation from trying to waffle the pan off the vehicle, which will happen especially if you're dealing with factory sealer. As I said, it is created by Satan. So what do? How do you fix it? Is it going to leak? Well, yeah, you got to fix it. If you don't, absolutely it's going to leak. Now you can use a couple of different methods. I happen to have a set of body hammers, I have a set of dollies, I have a big 4x8 steel top workbench. So something like this isn't a big deal. It's just sheet metal. It can be fixed. If you're doing this at home in your driveway, a block of wood and a hammer, or a screwdriver on top, block of wood here, screwdriver here, hammer, and just take your time and bump it back into place. Don't try to do it all in one shot. You'll end up doing more damage. Just take your time. The metal knows where it wants to go. It'll remember, and you'll be fine. Don't try to put it together, don't try to get it close and then let the bolts run the rest of the way in. It's guaranteed to leak. Alright, so take the time here, make it right, put it back to the way it was, and you'll be absolutely fine. I'll be back in a bit. So once you get everything cleaned up and the pan ready to install, and your rear main cap bolted back into place and torqued down to whatever your recommended torque specs are from your repair book or Google or wherever you can get your information from. On this particular one with the Jeep, it comes with a new rubber one-piece gasket. Okay, it's one piece all the way around. The other cool thing it comes with are these. Alright, this is something new from Felpro. These are called snap-ups. And the way the directions say is that you screw these into the four corners of the engine, and then you put the oil pan gasket on those, then lift the oil pan up and start your bolts. That makes sure that everything stays in place and nothing moves around, and pretty much guaranteed a leak-free seal. The other thing that you want to do is right there, and right there at the front is you want to use a little bit of RTV per the instructions. I always do, again, just to make sure that you're not going to have any leaks. And then put everything back together. Put all your 132 bolts back in using every size socket that you have in your arsenal. Then start it up and, well, fill it up with oil, change the oil filter, and then start it up and check for leaks. We'll check back in a bit. Okay, so you fought your old rear main seal out. Now you're ready for the new one. So here's what you want to pay attention to. Here's the old rear main cap. I left the seal in. I haven't done anything. Alright, you see you have this tab on the end here. There's also a big lip that goes towards the front of the engine. When you read the directions, it even says it right on there. Large sealing lip must be positioned towards the front of the engine. Alright. When we look at the two halves that are in here, you see one has these ears and one doesn't. Okay, and this is a little starter tool they give you to help start the seal in there. Always, always, always douse this thing with oil before you start trying to slide it around the motor. Otherwise, you're just going to end up tearing it, and you're going to be doing this job again in 3 months. Okay, so after checking everything out, we determined that the master cylinder is bad, so we went ahead and threw a new master cylinder on it. Generally, it's a pretty easy job. You have two lines here and here, and then you're going to have two bolts, one here, two nuts, sorry. Take those off, take the old master cylinder off, throw it on the bench, put your new one on. When you're dealing with older vehicles, you're going to run into rust, especially here on the Jersey Shore or any place here in the Northeast. What I like to do, if I know I'm going to be taking anything apart, I'll start the day before, and I will start spraying everything I'm going to put my hands on with penetrating oil. I happen to use liquid wrench. You can use whatever you want. Kyrol is good. You know, there's you know, a lot of different products out there, especially with the bleeders. Now, what I'm doing is, while I'm cleaning the shop up a little bit, I'm just going to let this gravity bleed. All right. You know, with master cylinders, you do have to bench bleed them. It's a very simple process. As long as you have a spare, two spare fittings and two spare lines, you can run back into here. If you don't, gravity bleeding works. It just takes a little longer. Some people will argue that you have to. Some people will argue that you don't have to. I've done countless master cylinders and calipers and wheel cylinders and never had a problem with that. When it comes to getting these things off, your fittings here and also your brake bleeders, you may potentially have some problems. The biggest one being rust. So, along with the penetrating oil, I sometimes use a little bit of heat. I have my favorite little MAP gas torch that I like to use, and I will heat everything up just enough so that I can break this little bleeder here loose. Once that's loose, I'll take it all the way out, and then I'll put Never Seez on it and put it back in. That way, if I ever have to, or somebody else ever has to come back in here, they're not going to have the same problem. Where I have it gravity bleeding to is back here. Now I just opened up this bleeder, so there's really no fluid running into it yet, but you can see just a little bit. And it is what it says. It's gravity bleeding. Gravity will pull the fluid down through the system, and then after that we could start actually bleeding the brakes. Don't be afraid to get angry with these, but also be prepared that if this little bleeder over here, if that breaks off, you can get a repair kit. You can rethread it. Honestly, wheel cylinders, especially for this thing, they're 12 bucks a piece. The calipers are $25 a piece. There's 155,000 miles on this particular vehicle. Just pick everything up and prepare to change all of it. If you don't have to, more power to you. We got lucky on this one, and we are on a budget with this one. But we got lucky, and you know, all the brake bleeders opened up after a little persuasion, and now we're just going to go ahead and bleed the brakes, and then we'll take it for a test drive and see how we did. All right, we'll check back. Okay, so we're going through the brake system, checking to make sure everything is working the way it's supposed to. And this is one of those things that you want to look out for. If you're not aware, most calipers are what's called a floating caliper. So the idea is that these pins here that the bolts go through have to move freely so the caliper can slide and you get even wear on your brake pads. Well, this one, as you can see, is frozen solid. This one I've already loosened up. And if you buy a new caliper, you'll see that these move very freely too. Basically, it's just a matter of, in this case, taking a hammer and waffling this thing back and forth until it finally moved. So what I'll do is I'll pull these boots off, clean the pin, grease it, put it back together with the boots, and then it should work as good as new. Nothing else is leaking on it. The seal around the piston here is nice and dry, so there's no need really to replace this caliper. And again, you know, this customer is on a budget, so we're trying to save as many parts as we can here. See you in a bit. So the last part of our little project here was to just put some finishing touches on. The first was cleaning up this engine compartment that was full of oil. That's all nice and clean now. Also did underneath, all the way back to the rear axle. And then if you remember, our custom wiring job that was in here is now gone. Everything's cleaned up, looks the way it's supposed to. So all we're going to do is a little final cleaning, and then after that we're going to send it home to the customer. Okay, so everything's done. You put the tools away, you clean the floor, and then you take a step back and you look at the final product. What did you end up with? You ended up with a good driver. You ended up with a vehicle that you could take out, go out for ice cream, do whatever you want, and not have to worry about it. This particular truck, what all went into it? Well, it wasn't really that bad. We were in for about $230 in parts. We're in for a couple of days worth of work on it, working here and there. We did an oil pan gasket, we did a rear main seal, we did a set of door locks, we did front brake pads, we rebuilt the front calipers, we inspected the rear brakes and make sure that they were working and adjusted the rear brakes properly. We cleaned up the wiring for it, adjusted the driver's side door because, well, somebody got that all screwed up. And now it's something that the owner will be proud to take out and show off and go out and enjoy. This is something that anybody can do at home. Take it over a weekend or 2 weekends or 3 weekends, whatever it takes. The fact of the matter is that you can do this. And if you can't, well, take it to a shop. Maybe you got a friend of yours that I could recommend it. If you're out here on the Jersey Shore, well, bring it to our shop. We'll be happy to help you out. We went through this not to do any specific thing on the truck. We went through this to show you that you can do this, what goes into buying a used vehicle and what to look out for. Hopefully we were able to help somebody out here, and if you like the video, like us, subscribe, share, tell your friends about us, and as always, stop on in and we'll hang out and talk. Until then, peace.